The entity known as Samael is a figure of great importance in Jewish mythology and related religious traditions. He is often regarded as the main angel of death within Jewish tradition. Their names and epithets, such as the poison of God, the blindness of God, and the left hand of God, reflect a dual nature of both destruction and divine authority. Although Samael plays a vital role as an executor of God's justice, he is also often associated with evil, which causes an ambiguous interpretation of his character. He is, in many ways, a complex figure, occupying an intermediate position between good and evil, a tool of the divine plan that carries out God's punishment ruthlessly. Samael is often compared to Satan, but it is important to understand that, unlike Satan, he does not seek evil of his own free will, but acts under God's orders. He is described as a figure who serves to fulfill the destiny of sinners, carrying out punishments according to the divine plan. His association with death and destruction means that he is often seen as a personification of evil, although he, in essence, acts to fulfill the divine will. This complexity makes him one of the most enigmatic figures in Jewish mythology, as he represents both the punitive side of God and the suffering and tragedy associated with his mission. In some traditions, Samael is seen not only as the angel of death, but also as the tempter of humanity, a force that incites men to commit sin. This view is linked to Samael's role as the one who induces human beings to fail in their spiritual and moral responsibilities. His figure as a tempter places him in a position similar to that of Satan in many stories, but with an important difference. While Satan is seen as a direct enemy of God, Samael is a tool in God's hands to accomplish his will. This brings a layer of complexity to his figure, as he acts as a servant of God, but at the same time plays a role that seems to contradict the divine nature. Samael's story is especially notable in the context of the Garden of Eden, where he is described as the figure who engineered the fall of Adam and Eve. According to some traditions, Samael was responsible for using the serpent to tempt Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. This serpent was not a separate entity, but an extension of Samael himself, or a creature that he directly controlled. This contrasts with the traditional view, in which Satan is seen as the serpent who deceives Eve. The idea of Samael as the serpent who induces human disobedience makes him a central figure in the narrative of original sin, with implications for the fall of humanity. In some versions of the story, Samael is described as the true father of Cain, the first murderer in the Bible. According to these narratives, Samael seduced Eve and led her to have a sexual encounter with him, resulting in the birth of Cain. This view places Samael as a direct agent of sin and corruption, an evil force that not only tempts human beings, but also corrupts humanity's bloodline. This adds an even darker layer to the figure of Samael, as he is not only responsible for instigating original sin, but also for the corruption of the subsequent generation. Samael first appears in texts of Jewish tradition during the Second Temple period, where he is seen as a great force of evil. In the non-canonical book Baruch's Apocalypse, a work attributed to the scribe Baruch, Samael is mentioned as an entity that plays a crucial role in the history of humanity. The book describes Baruch praying to God, questioning why Jerusalem suffered under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. When Baruch does not receive a direct answer from God, an angel is sent to show him the mysteries of the heavens, including Samael's role in human history. Know Baruch's Apocalypse. The narrative describes a celestial journey in which Baruch is taken by an angel through different strata of the sky. During this journey, Baruch is introduced to a tree that led Adam to sin, the same tree that God had forbidden man to eat from. The angel reveals that the tree was planted by Samael, which caused God's wrath. This vision causes Samael to be seen not only as a being who executes God's will, but also as someone who directly challenges the divine plan, planting evil and temptation in the world. God's wrath against Samael is shown not only through the tree's cursing, but also through Samael's direct punishment. In Baruch's account, the angel also reveals that Samael tricked Adam into touching the cursed tree, knowing that this would result in punishment. This cunning and calculating action shows how Samael not only tempts people to disobey, but also manipulates circumstances in such a way as to ensure that sin occurs. Samael, therefore, is not just a tempter, but a manipulator, a being who uses his intelligence and cunning to lead human beings into error, with the intention of challenging them and provoking divine punishment. Samael's envious and vengeful nature becomes clear as he seeks to overthrow divine creation, defying the order established by God. This action by Samael in tricking Adam into touching the tree and being punished is a clear example of his vengeful nature. He does not accept God's punishment and instead turns against God's creation. His anger against God is evident, as he not only wants to see Adam fall, but also rejoices in the tragedy this causes God. The fact that Samael loses God's favor and becomes a figure associated with evil, personifying destruction, is a reflection of his choice to rebel against God. In doing so, he not only harms Adam, but also directly harms the divine will, becoming a pivotal figure in the narrative of human fall. In texts like Isaiah's Ascension, Samael is mentioned as a force that corrupts kings and leaders. The prophet Isaiah warns King Hezekiah about Samael's influence on his son Manasseh, who strays from the righteous path and starts adopting evil practices. According to Isaiah, Samael will act as an agent of destruction, leading Manasseh to a path of sin and rebellion against God. Samael's impact on Manasseh is profound, as he not only corrupts the king, but also leads the people of Jerusalem down a path of darkness and idolatry. This episode reveals how Samael can influence even the most powerful figures of the time, using his strength to corrupt morality and justice. Manasseh's rise to power after Hezekiah's death is a reflection of Samael's power over Judah's royal lineage. As a result of Samael's influence, Manasseh ignores his father's teachings and begins to follow ungodly practices, including the cult of Belial, a demon associated with lawlessness. This deviation from the righteous path has a devastating impact on Jerusalem, which becomes a center of corruption and chaos. The earth, which was supposed to be a reflection of divine justice, is transformed into a place of immorality and disorder due to Samael's influence. This corruption is seen as a direct consequence of Manasseh's alliance with Samael and other demonic powers. Isaiah, upon seeing Samael's destructive impact on Jerusalem, decides to abandon the city and retreat to Bethlehem. The description of Isaiah leaving Jerusalem in despair reflects the degree of corruption that has taken hold in the city. The prophet can no longer bear the vision of evil that took over the kingdom, symbolizing the failure of the spiritual and moral leadership of the time. However, Isaiah does not remain silent in the face of Manasseh's corruption and begins to openly denounce the king, which arouses the wrath of Samael and his demonic allies. This conflict between the prophet and the king reflects the struggle between the forces of good and evil, with Samael acting as a powerful enemy of truth and divine justice. No Testament of Solomon, Samael is again portrayed as an important figure in the fight against the forces of evil. Solomon, known for his wisdom, turns to magic to deal with the demons and supernatural forces that threaten his reign and the construction of the temple. During an invocation session, Solomon tries to appease Samael with praise before conjuring him. Solomon's attempt of controlling Samael with words and magic reveals the immense power that this entity possesses, even among the most powerful figures in the Bible. Samael, like many other celestial and demonic beings, is a force that cannot be easily manipulated, which makes Solomon's task even more difficult. In some Gnostic interpretations, Samael is seen as the demiurge, a figure who creates the universe but is blind to true reality. Note Apocrypha of John. Samael declares himself as the supreme God, but his arrogance and ignorance prevent him from seeing spiritual truth. He creates an imperfect world governed by ignorance, and, due to his own blindness, is unable to achieve true divinity. This version of Samael is marked by his arrogance, as he believes he is the creator of the universe, but is unable to perceive the existence of a superior and truer deity. Samael's fall, as portrayed in Gnostic texts, is a result of his ignorance and arrogance. He is a being who considers himself absolute and complete, but his limited vision leads to the creation of an imperfect and corrupted world. This story is a representation of the fallibility of the demiurge, who creates evil without realizing that he is far from truth and divine purity. Samael's fall, therefore, is seen not only as a punishment, but as a natural consequence of his spiritual blindness. His fall symbolizes the failure of any entity that considers itself superior without being in harmony with divine truth. Samael is also mentioned in mystical texts of Kabbalah, where his function varies according to the interpretation of the text. In some traditions, he is described as a powerful archangel, responsible for guiding souls after death, but also associated with evil and destruction. His presence in Kabbalah reflects the duality of his nature, being at the same time an agent of God and a being who personifies death and corruption. This duality makes Samael an intriguing figure, as he is, on the one hand, a messenger of God, but on the other, someone who brings destruction and punishment. Kabbalistic tradition also suggests that Samael had a relationship with Lilith, Adam's first wife, who rebelled against him and fled the Garden of Eden. Samael and Lilith are considered an evil couple, whose children are described as demons. The union between Samael and Lilith adds a layer of complexity to the figure of Samael, as he is not just an isolated being, but part of a demonic lineage that destabilizes the divine order. The story of Samael and Lilith shows how the forces of evil can be interconnected and how corruption spreads across generations. The figure of Samael is also associated with the concept of demonization in Jewish tradition. In some traditions, he is described as the one responsible for tempting human beings to sin, but also as the one who exercises his authority over the heavenly court. In this context, Samael becomes a figure who not only tempts, but also accuses human beings, bringing divine wrath upon those who deserve punishment. This image of Samael as accuser reflects the idea that he is a force that acts in the world not only to destroy, but also to ensure that sinners face divine justice. In the texts of Baruch's Apocalypse, Samael is also associated with the fall of other important biblical figures, such as Adam and Cain. In each of these episodes, he plays a crucial role in the corruption of humans, showing how his influence spans generations. He is not just a tempter or an executor of punishments, but an active force that contributes to the downfall of human beings, instigating them to disobey divine laws. His ability to corrupt and destroy is one of his most fearsome characteristics. Samael is described in several religious cultures as a figure who occupies an intermediate position between good and evil. Although he is an agent of God, his nature is ambiguous, and his mission involves bringing both punishment and suffering. This duality is reflected in many stories that involve him, such as those of the Garden of Eden and the corruption of the kings of Judah. Samael is not a totally evil being, but he is also not totally benevolent, which makes him a complex figure who challenges traditional notions of good and evil. Its presence in biblical and religious stories raises questions about divine justice and the role of evil forces in the world. Despite his role as executor of divine punishment, Samael is not a simple figure. He is described as someone who acts with a will of his own, who seeks revenge against God and his creations. This is evident in his actions against Adam, Eve, Cain, and even the kings of Judah. Samael presents himself as a force that, although subordinate to God, seeks to corrupt and destroy divine creation as an act of rebellion. His revenge against the heavenly order reflects the treacherous and cunning nature of his personality. Samael also plays a significant role in the rivalry between biblical characters such as Jacob and Esau. He is described as the guardian of Esau, Jacob's brother, and some believe that the angel who fought with Jacob in the book of Genesis may actually be true Samael. This story highlights Samael's role as a figure who is involved in the struggle between opposites, a force that may be on the side of evil, but who also participates in the divine plan of testing and redemption. Samael's presence in mystical and esoteric traditions suggests that he is a central figure in understanding the cosmic forces of good and evil. He is not only an Old Testament figure, but also appears in texts that explore the nature of the universe and the eternal battle between light and dark. Its association with Lilith and other demons highlights its importance in stories involving the corruption of the world and human souls. Samael is, therefore, a figure that transcends the limits of the Bible and expands to other traditions and mythologies. The view of Samael as a blindly arrogant being is one of the most striking characteristics in many traditions. He sees himself as superior to other entities, which makes him incapable of understanding the true nature of God. His spiritual blindness leads him to make fatal mistakes, such as creating an imperfect world and corrupting his own creatures. Samael, as demiurge, represents the idea that arrogance and ignorance can lead to the destruction of all that is good and pure. Furthermore, Samael's connection with the concept of death and destruction makes him a figure who is always present in moments of suffering and tragedy. He not only carries out the divine will, but also feeds on the pain and chaos he creates. His presence in moments of human suffering reflects the destructive nature of his mission and its link to death, not just as a consequence of sin, but as an active force that brings about the end. This association with death places Samael in a dark position, but it also reveals his complexity as a figure who is simultaneously necessary and destructive. In the context of Kabbalah, Samael is seen as a force that works together with other cosmic entities to maintain balance in the universe. Its presence on the Tree of Life, although associated with evil, is necessary for the functioning of the cosmos. This suggests that Samael is not completely bad, but plays a fundamental role in the structure of the universe. Although it is associated with evil and destruction, it is also an essential part of the process of transformation and renewal of the world. Samael, therefore, is a figure that goes beyond the limits of conventional evil. He is not simply a being who opposes God or humanity, but someone who plays a crucial role in spiritual and cosmic development. His presence in Old Testament stories and esoteric tradition suggests that he is a central character in understanding the functioning of the spiritual world and the interaction between the divine and the human. This makes him a paradoxical figure, who at the same time represents darkness and light. Samael's story is a reflection on the nature of evil and how it can be used to fulfill a greater purpose. Although Samael is often associated with suffering and punishment, he is also a part of the divine plan, albeit indirectly. This leads us to question how evil can be necessary for the realization of the greatest good, a central theme in many religious and philosophical traditions. Samael is, therefore, a figure who challenges us to rethink our notions of morality, punishment, and justice. Samael's impact on humanity is profound and lasting. He is not only a figure who tempts humans to sin, but also someone who brings eternal consequences to those who fall into his sway. Its presence in biblical stories is a constant reminder that evil exists in the world and that he is always lurking, ready to deceive and destroy. However, the figure of Samael also teaches us that suffering can be a path to redemption and understanding the divine plan. In short, Samael is, without a doubt, one of the most complex and enigmatic figures in Jewish mythology. His duality, being both an agent of God and a personification of evil, makes him a difficult figure to understand and even more difficult to classify. He doesn't easily fit into traditional molds of good and evil, which makes him all the more intriguing. While on the one hand, he is a force that represents death and destruction, elements that we normally associate with corruption and suffering. On the other, Samael also plays an essential role in God's cosmic plan. He is the executor of divine justice, the agent who acts in the shadows to fulfill God's designs, even when his actions may seem cruel or incomprehensible to human vision. Whether as a tempter, who instigates humans to disobey, as an executor of divine punishments, or as a rebellious force that challenges the heavenly order, Samael never ceases to be a figure who symbolizes the tension between the forces of good and evil. Their presence reminds us that behind visible reality, there are forces operating behind the scenes of creation, often beyond our understanding. His story is a reflection on the complexity of the spiritual universe and how human and divine choices interact in mysterious ways. If you're interested in learning more about enigmatic figures like Samael, their influences, and how these stories intertwine in mythology and religion, be sure to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you guarantee you won't miss any videos on fascinating topics like this. Let's continue together on this journey of discovery and reflection.